House Bill 513, and I want to start with you on this one. Glenn, tell us a little something about House Bill 513.
It's a fairly simple bill. Seeks to put forward a referendum. If the bill was to move, it would allow voters in the state to decide whether gill nets and other the terminology they use are entangling nets that commercial fishermen use for catching seafood could be used in the state or not.
So this is a referendum that would it restrict the use of nets in inland waters? Is that right?
Yeah, if voters chose to do so, I guess it would. Now we don't have much concern about the bill moving right now. Our greatest concern is that we have some representatives in Raleigh who would even consider putting something like this forward when it's not scientifically justified. So.
Well, okay. What is the motivation? Do you have any indication for this?
Yeah. Stuff like this has been done in other states. Really from Texas all the way to South Carolina, and the motivation is purely allocation. They'll say it's about conservation. If you look back at the history on these bills, there's never been a gear ban adopted by a state or federal agency that's tasked with managing fisheries. And the reason for that is it's not supported by fisheries science. It's driven mostly by political sciences and just competition over that limited resource. And if you want to promote growth in the recreational industry, one sure way to do it is to take fish that are traditionally harvested commercially and reallocate them to the recreational sector.
Okay, so you see this as a reallocation of the fish, not necessarily a topic, and of course you mentioned this as well, limited resource, but conservation.
Yeah. We all have to work when you're dealing with a wild public resource. It's not unlimited, and you have to manage it, harvest on both the commercial and recreational side. And if you want to harvest more recreationally, unless you figure out how to make those fish produce more, you have to take them from the other sector. So it is purely an allocation issue, hidden under the disguise of conservation.
Okay. We've got Jess Hawkins here in the studio this morning, as I mentioned a moment ago, former member of the North Carolina Marine Fisheries Division, and also now the owner and creator of Crystal Coast Eco Tours. And Jess, good morning to you. Appreciate it.
Morning, Lockwood. Thank you for having me.
Always a pleasure. Question for you. Having worked with the Division of Marine Fisheries, do you have any indication, have you had any conversations with the division over the possibility of a referendum? I mean, here's my question. From a perspective of a member of the Division of Marine Fisheries, the fact that a decision that would normally be made by members of the Marine Fisheries Division, state and federal, and various agencies within, now being relegated to the public, what's your observation on that?
Well, I think in these issues of fish, especially fish in the coastal and coastal area, I always used science as the basis for trying to make objective decisions. People ask, well, and when I worked with the division, and actually I had the pleasure of serving on the policymaking board for a few years, the Marine Fisheries Commission, how do you make those decisions? What is true? And to me, the cornerstone of that was the science. And the division has made a lot of commitment, and as has our state by through the General Assembly, trying to collect scientific data to guide decisions, to make sure they're objective, make sure they're close to truth, and to make sure that they're fair. And so this takes it into this option presented by Representative Richardson and a couple others, would let the citizens decide. So then you take the science out of the equation. So now you're looking at public perception. And public perception, what I learned with the division, what I've learned running my own business, if you say something long enough, often enough,
Right.
or you have enough resources to put that message out there. And then when I say resources, money, people will determine, that will be their truth. And so to me personally, as a citizen, and then as a scientist, and also as a former policymaker, this is not the way our state wants to conduct business over a public trust resource, because this resource not only belongs to commercial fishermen and recreational fishermen, but also to consumers and also to people that just love the ambiance of the beautiful area of the Crystal Coast. So you've got to try to balance the use of those resources through all the people that want to enjoy them.
We're talking with Glenn Skinner, Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, and also joining us today, Jess Hawkins, who is, I mentioned a moment ago, a former member of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, and also the owner of Crystal Coast Eco Tours. When we come back, I want to talk about this issue of perception and the impact that relegating a decision that is normally the purview of a specific agency to the state's referendum, if that's setting a dangerous precedent. We'll find out more here in just a moment on Coastal Daybreak. Coastal Daybreak on the talk station FM 107 AM 1240. We're talking fishing today, and we'll be talking, of course, about big rock blue marlin a little later on. But right now we're talking with representatives of the commercial fishing industry, Glenn Skinner, Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, and Jess Hawkins, former member of the Division of Marine Fisheries, North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, as well as now the owner of Crystal Coast Eco Tours. Obviously, someone who's interested in benefiting the ecological aspects of our coastline and the opportunities to take advantage of that. Jess, I want to go to you back to the question I asked a few moments ago, related to relegating a decision that is the purview, you've mentioned science on several occasions, of an agency that has the expertise to make some of these decisions, relegating this to a public referendum, a just sort of, I'm going to use the term, a casual decision, a voter's decisions, because not everybody understands the activities associated with fishing, recreational or commercial, because there are a lot of people that don't have fishing licenses, that aren't active fishermen, but do enjoy the resource, as you mentioned a few moments ago, that enjoy consuming wild-caught local seafood. So what about, is this potentially a dangerous precedent?
Most certainly. You would think as a voter, I elect my General Assembly members or I vote to try to attempt to elect members that represent me and represent my community to make informed decisions about what is best for my community and also for my state. So this would take not only that away from them, but it provides it for, the 10.5 million people we have in our state. Also, the General Assembly, which when I worked on this issue, what should our management framework be in our state, and we did a 2-year assessment of that through it's called the Moratorium Steering Committee, and we looked at states across the country. So some states, they manage their fisheries resources through the General Assembly. And then again, one state decided to have a referendum, i.e. Florida, to let voters decide to do what to do on just that one particular type of gear. And so when we looked at that, it was clear that the best framework was to allow a body that had expertise or that was dedicated to try to make the decisions, and to have a science body, i.e. the Marine Fisheries, Division of Marine Fisheries, to advise or to provide information to that policy body, and that policy body would be subject to the review of the General Assembly. And that's what we have now in our state. We have a Marine Fisheries Commission, and we have a Division of Marine Fisheries that provides scientific information to that Marine Fisheries Commission. And to me, that's still the best government framework that I've seen in our country and in other countries. That is similar to other civilized countries. They have a policy-making body that makes the decision on these, most of the time, complex scientific issues, and then sometimes complex social issues, such as Glenn said, how to allocate a public trust resource.
Real quickly, you said if Florida related to a particular gear. To describe what you say, what do you mean by the word gear?
Gear is the type of device that people use to catch fish. I'm an avid recreational fisherman, so my gear is a hook.
Okay.
So in the Florida case, it was a net, and the net particularly, it put a square footage of net that a fisherman could use. And this language, when I looked at the Florida language, is the exact same language for the most part. So Representative Richardson has utilized the language from the Florida referendum to put out to propose for North Carolinians to do the same.
All right. To your point earlier, Glenn Skinner, again, the executive director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, representing commercial fishermen. What about the role of legislators? Why are they willing to, I'm going to use the term, abdicate this responsibility to the public?
I think it's a mixture. The primary reason, in my opinion, is the folks who put this forward, Representative Richardson, Yarborough, support the agenda of some organizations, and they feel if they put this out to the public, those organizations would have the resources, as they did in Florida, to more or less get their message out and convince the public that they needed to get rid of gillnet. The CCA, Coastal Conservation Association, is a national organization. They've got a lot of resources, a lot of funds across the nation, and they would certainly do just as they did in Florida: TV ads, billboards, magazines, newspapers, and push the message across the state. And of course, our state, we've got a pretty long coastline, but we go through the west quite a ways, and there's a lot of people who have no idea about fisheries issues. If this come up, I think they literally think they could out-message the commercial fishing industry and convince those folks that they needed to get gillnets out of the water, even though it wasn't justified.
Okay.
So I think that's the primary motivation. The other motivation may be that our issues are kind of controversial, and they really would rather somebody else make that decision than themselves.
Okay, before we go to the break, the gear that we're talking about, you said gill nets. Is this all nets? Would this be all types of nets, including set nets, things of this nature?
Yeah, primarily everything we use, and it does, as Jess said, allow for a very limited amount of net to be used, but it wouldn't be enough to harvest commercial quantities of seafood. What
impact would this have on the commercial fishing industry?
It would be devastating to the folks who depend on gill nets like I do to harvest seafood. It would impact the amount of local seafood that went in the restaurants, around the state and across the country. It would impact coastal communities, especially rural ones, like Hyde County, Pamlico County, those areas. It could be devastating for places like that.
We're going to the break here. Jess, you mentioned this a moment ago. What impact do you think this would have on the restaurant community, the tourism community?
Well, in restaurant tourism and consumers, consumers are a key component left out of this this discussion. And again, out of the 10.5 million people, we don't know how many people eat seafood, but seafood is good for you to eat. Domestic seafood is better for you to eat than foreign seafood because of our stringent standards on catching and also environmental standards. And so, U.S. is the second largest consumer of seafood in the world. And so, if you can manage a gear or manage a fishery that provides seafood to a consumer that is healthy for you and that is sustainably managed, why not?
All right, we're going to take a quick break, come back, wrap things up with our guests. We have Glenn Skinner, Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, Jess Hawkins, former member of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, and now his own company, Crystal Coast Eco Tours. Stay with us. Coastal Daybreak here on the Talk Station, FM 107, AM 1240. Wrapping things up here with our guest, we have Glenn Skinner, Executive Director of the North Carolina Fisheries Association, along with Jess Hawkins, a former member of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries, as well as now the operator of his own Eco Tour program, the Crystal Coast Eco Tours. Let me go to a quick question for you on this one, Jess. How busy are you in the eco-tour business?
People have discovered the Crystal Coast, Lockwood, even during the pandemic. So I'm as busy as a man has a right to be.
Okay.
That's retired.
All right. I'm going to get to you, Glenn, because I want to talk to you about the wrap-up of this in just a moment. But to you, Jess, you were just looking at some statistics, and how many states currently have net bans?
Only a couple. And so when some people have done some analysis of this, and so I'm looking at Louisiana, Texas, and then, of course, Florida, and really for the rest, this is in terms of net ban, it's a gill net ban. Mm-hmm. And so they allow limited types of gill nets. In fact, North Carolina has substantial limits on its gill nets. And so
there are already limits there.
Yes.
How many, you were giving me, Glenn, how many active commercial fishermen are there right now?
It's, I guess, so a little over 2,000. I don't know the
a little over 2,000.
Right off the top of my head, but it's a lot less than there were in the past.
Okay. Real quickly, okay, a little over 2,000. Jess, what was the high peak? You were looking at the statistics, and of course, former member of the North Carolina Division of Marine Fisheries. You have access to this information. What was the peak of commercial fishermen at one point?
Well, it was during the days when the division collected, license information. We had as many as close to in the tens of thousands. They were called endorsements, and now we switched that to an individual license. And as Glenn said, there's only 2,000 active commercial fishermen in 2019. And then in terms of vessels, because most fishermen have to use a vessel to catch fish, that's declined about 50%. There's about 6,000 vessels, and they've reached a peak of about 22,000 vessels. And so, and if you look at trips where people use gill nets to catch fish, they had about 60,000 trips were made in 97, which was the peak, and in 17 they decreased to 29,000. So over half. So a greater than 50% reduction in effort. So if people are arguing that there's too much net in the water or there's too many fishermen out there, that's just not the case.
Glenn, what is the cause for this reduction in numbers?
It's a combination of things. I think a lot of folks in the world now don't choose to do the kind of stuff that we do for a living. It's hard, dirty work, long hours. Regulation is certainly a big part of it. Fishermen don't see the future that they used to see in fishing with over-regulation and threats of bills like these, petitions for rulemaking to get shrimp trawls out of the water, game fish bills. It's just kind of one attack after another, and you don't encourage your kids, if you love them, to get into a business that you don't see a future in. So it is a combination of things, but regulations or threat of regulation in this case is certainly enough to discourage folks from getting involved investing in the industry where they don't know if next year they'll be able to recoup that investment.
As we wrap it up with you, Glenn, what next?
As far as on this bill, we're going to sit on it, watch, keep an eye on it. We're going to continue to fight for the industry. We're an important industry. We produce food, as Jess said, a very healthy source of protein, and we're going to keep fighting for the industry and try to move forward and hopefully one day promote some growth in the industry and see those numbers turn up instead of down.
Jess, rapid question for you. What will be the response to by the Division of Marine Fisheries on this and the Marine Fisheries Council? Are they responding to this in any way at this point?
I do not know, Lockwood. I really have retired from being actively engaged in that, so I do not know. I'm hopeful they will, but based on the last 15 years, I think they'll follow it just like you and I have. But one point I wanted to make is, you say, well, why would someone want to propose something like this? And most people cite declining resources, or you can't catch enough fish. And one point I'd like your listeners to know is that North Carolina is second on the Atlantic coast in terms of their recreational fisheries. So you see these declines in commercial fisheries. the recreational fisheries, the numbers of trips have increased from 11 million trips in 1998 to 22 million trips in 2017. Our catches, our numbers of fish are going up in our state. And so, and again, we're second under to Florida, and we don't have nearly the shoreline that Florida has to fish from.
All right. Jess Hawkins with us and Glenn Skinner, to both of you, thank you for being with us this morning here on Coastal Daybreak.